Curling now enters the Sports Weekend spotlight.
1963, when they took the Brier to Brandon.
Hi, everybody. I'm Don Whitman with Don Duguid, two-time world champion.
Reveille will take the game.
Not a question about it. Right on the nose. It never wavered.
A little bit of curling history for you.
High drama, high intensity.
Hi again, curling fans. Colleen.
Hello, Devin.
Welcome back.
Switzerland, darn it.
Why are we not in Switzerland? You know, we've got a lot to cover today, but one of the things watching that historical footage, you look at the advancement of the brooms, and we're talking about the science of sweeping today, from the core brooms to the brooms you were using in 1982 to where we are now. It's incredible, isn't it?
It has improved a lot. When I think of some of the other, like after the push broom came all kinds of fabric heavy brooms that were so hard to move compared to what we use now with the carbon fiber and the very almost right on the surface, my hardline broom. Well, it is on the surface, but it's this thick. Sure. So boy, the changes have been a lot, but we are talking a lot about sweeping today.
No kidding. And of course, you've got the whiteboards and you've got the stained glass windows behind you. Wonderful that, Colleen, has got people loving your whiteboards already. Fans, let us know where you're tuning in from, questions, all of that. But of course, the Men's World Curling Championship happening in Switzerland, and Canada is right at the top once again. Team Gushue 8-1. Sweden 9-0. There's the updated standings. Colin Gushue and Adine continue to get it done.
Look at Nick Adine. I mean, you know what? Remember, he was on fire at last year's Worlds and then sort of stumbled to the finish and didn't medal. People were sort of wondering, where's Nick this year? Is he third? Is he this? Is he that? And there he is, just playing his usual amazing, the guy that shows up at World Championships year after year. He has looked so strong, and I am so looking forward to the showdown against Canada today.
Right, we're less than an hour away. You know, there are so many wonderful things to talk about this Team Gushue and the way they play. Brad is leading all skips with an 89.9% through 9 games.
Let's sound that 90.
Right. Sounds better. And Nichols, 92% if we're rounding it up. He leads all thirds. This dynamic duo, Colleen, for more than 2 decades at the top of their game still, and seemingly continue to get better.
Yeah, I'll take them all the way back to their junior career.
Right.
You know, and for so long that they can probably read each other's minds. Mark is such a great wingman for Brad, because he's always so calm, so positive, and Mr. Dependable and reliable. How these two keep elevating their game with every year and every past their 40s. It's like they just, and part of that is sweeping. Like, there's no question that Jeff and EJ make a lot of shots for those two as they're skimming by guards. By that, they're able to chase. The degree of difficulty for their shots has gone up so much because they're chasing so much and they're bringing sweeping into it, as we saw at the Brier. As we thought the Scotties, especially with Rachel and Jen's teams, they were excellent at it. And we're seeing it at the international level too.
We have a jam-packed show, of course, at 1 p.m. Eastern, Canada versus Sweden. If we can bring the standings up once again, Colleen, Canada has wins over a lot of those teams, now at the top over Germany. So there's a lot of situations where tiebreakers go in favor of Canada. But suffice to say, this is such a pivotal game because if you are in that 1 or 2 position, you go directly to the semifinal.
And it's not an easy finish for Canada because, you know, they have Sweden and then Japan, who hasn't had the best Worlds, but we know they can play. And Switzerland, who struggled early at these World Championships, but they've definitely found their game. And when that crowd, you know, it's only 1,300, but it sounds a lot bigger than that in that arena. I mean, Gushue and company have played against hostile environments before, but it'll be loud. So it is a tough next 3 games, you know, that they've got on tap for them.
It'll be a huge showdown, no doubt. If Canada can win this, it's a huge step to placing in the top two. And now we're going to actually go inside the arena. We're going to Switzerland because our man on the ground, and of course, the man that is leading the Korean men's national program at the World Championships, Mike Harris. A friend of the show. Are you outside? Where are you, Mike?
I'm inside, but I'm where I shouldn't be, which is on the upper deck here with all the commentator positions.
Great.
But I kind of faked my way up here, and then here's the venue on the inside.
Great.
There we are.
Wow.
And the real big matchup, of course, is us against New Zealand tonight. I don't know if you guys have even talked about that, but.
You congratulations on the win, though.
Oh my God, that was hard, Colleen.
It's hard, isn't it? It's hard. Hard to lose. Curling is just hard. But tell me,
we were up 8-1. We're up 8-1 after 3 ends, and we had to kill them in an extra. If you know what I'm saying. So that was been that kind of a week. Been that kind of a week for us. So.
Yeah. How do you explain weeks like that? Because if you can figure out that,
I'm not sure.
$1 million.
Right. Well, we've actually had some games where we actually played pretty well. We played really well against Gushue last night. And to your point of Mark and Brad just making everything, I think Mark was 98 and Brad didn't miss much. And we kind of took him to 10. And okay, boys, just keep playing like that. And we started off great this first 3 ends this morning, and then they're got nervous. They're trying to find ways to win. And it's been a tough field. Like the Pan-Continental group where they played so well. I mean, we only actually played one other team from the Pan-Continental, and that was Schuster, or USA, early in the week, and we had a good game against them, and then squeaked one out here today. But the story for us just has been some missed opportunities. I would say we should have 3 wins. We could have 4 more, but it's good to get 1. Let's go with that.
Mike, strategy is such a key at these World Championships.
Yeah.
You're a master strategist. We get the pleasure of listening to you on the slam and commentary for so long. You know the game. You can see the shots. Is that the biggest thing we're seeing from the top teams to the bottom half? Is just pivotal moments and navigating.
Right. They don't beat themselves, right? The top teams just don't beat themselves. We've had 2 or 3 games where not recognizing early enough when you're in trouble, not being able to make the right decision or miss the wrong way even. No one makes all their shots. Mark Nichols accepted, of course, but it's hard to imagine that you're going to make all your shots. So what you want to do is when you don't make it, make sure you wreck on the guard or make sure you open things up. Or, we're 3 up with playing 8 today, and we had our third miss one wide and heavy in a situation where it's a mess in the 4-foot. They put another one top button. We were lucky to give up a steal of 2. So it's things like that, and it's hard to even teach that because the situation if you're in a tie game in that situation, it's almost easier where I just have to make sure I get this. Don't be heavy type of thing, right? And when you're 2 up or 3 up with the hammer and you're just trying to hold on. It's like I don't know if the adrenaline kicks in, whatever it is. And until you go through it enough times, you tend to make mistakes, mental mistakes, which I never get mad at missed shots. I just get mad at kind of doing dumb stuff. You know what I mean? And I've been telling them for the whole season, let's just try to make our shots as easy as possible. And sometimes we look for the hardest ones, and that's not easy. They're harder to make, and generally they don't benefit you any more than the simple guard might. Learning that is hard. The Korean women's program have done a great job of figuring it out, and I think a lot of it is just playing some of the top teams all the time. Like, these guys don't get into the bigger events, and they don't see the very best in the world very often. So a lot of times just playing well is enough, but against the top guys, you have to play well and be smart, and it's a delicate balance.
Yeah, you said too. There's a curling intuition that you see from the top skips, and it
right.
might be.
But it's learned, though, Colleen. As you know, it's learned, right?
Yeah,
it's a learned skill. So Brad Gushue, when he was just out of juniors, we always just kind of used to wait for a bad decision. We weren't waiting for missed shots from him or Mark. We were waiting for, okay, there's the call that's going to help us get our 2 here and kind of turn the tide. That just doesn't happen again with the top teams anymore, and especially not with Brad, who's arguably the best of the bunch, right? So, but between Nicodine and Brad and Returnaz and Mowat at the top. The cream definitely has risen here. Ice conditions are good enough. There's a lot of frost the last couple of days, but the weather's supposed to be better now for the weekend. And as you said, the crowd's been awesome. Like even the Swiss teams are pleasantly surprised how loud it is and exciting it is in here. So it's been a really good event, and it's a nice size venue. And I'm looking forward to watching some curling on the weekend because we sure aren't playing.
It's a nice place to be watching. I can say that. But we're talking a lot about sweeping today. Science is sweeping. The University of Saskatchewan study that they're doing for World Curling Federation that's coming up. But tell me about the big change that's happened over the last couple of years, where now no rock is safe. They can carve it in. You can chase stuff like crazy. Right. How big an impact, and what do you think the future of sweeping is going to look like even in 2 years' time with the bigger guys dominating? You can't compete without at least one beast of a sweeper. You just can't compete, right? It's just impossible to. Every team's got at least one person on their team. The Swiss have that Pablo Lachat, whose technique is really unusual but super effective. And the Italians have two big guys on their team. I was joking with someone the other day where, back in the corn broom days or any rink rats, whatever, you used to just find the two biggest people you could find to sweep. And if they could throw the rock, great. But you needed that strength to sweep. And it's kind of gone back to that now. It's almost back to the late 70s, early 80s, where you just can't get away without having really big, strong athletes on the brush. And the sweeping testing and all that, the fine foams, the next, the fabric has been gone over with, I think they did a good job with that. But how do you control, the amount of pressure that someone the size of Amos Mozaner can put on the broom? Is he's 6'6" and, weighs whatever he weighs, 240, right. And it's all muscle. And I don't know that they can really temper it. I don't think there's an easy way to do that. So,
Make him use corn brooms. Make him use corn brooms.
That would do it. Yeah, that would drive some people from the game, right? I think that would work. But anyway, it's sweeping. It's just the sport is just so much more athletic. Mm-hmm. When you look at the shape these athletes are, like every person in every locker room's got a six-pack and they're jacked and they're just working out so hard, and it's really impressive. And even some of the guys that I've seen over the years that weren't that way have become that way in order to be competitive. And you just can't get away with not having that strength. And EJ and Team Jacobs was kind of at the forefront of that whole fitness craze. If you remember back in Sochi when they won their gold medal, they were the fittest team in the world by quite a wide margin back then, if you recall. And now everyone's that way. So it's not going away. And I think it's for the betterment at the top level. Certainly, it's just. It's nice to see athletes here. I don't think you're going to, when curling got into the Olympics, even you go back to the 88 or whatever, and 98 when we were there, the physique of the athlete has certainly changed a lot since then. Ed Wernick debacle when they ordered him to lose weight and get in shape. That became a national W5. Turns out they were right.
Yeah. Right. All right, Mike. We'll leave it there because you have a game. Yeah. We have second practice, and after our win, I'm just probably going to stop at the beer store on the way down to the rink. And Carolyn McRory Carolyn is coaching the New Zealand guys from Cheryl Bernard's old team, of course. Okay. And so we have a bottle of wine on the line tonight. So this is a big one.
Listen, all right. Nick just quickly, because we've talked about how great Gushue is, but Nick seems to be back. Sometimes.
Yeah, they're playing really well. The other thing about sweeping that I wanted to say too about Jeff Walker and his relationship with Brad and Mark. I've watched them time and time again this week. So this is the benefit of staying together for a long period of time, is that as soon as the rock is let go, the sweepers are making a decision and taking the initiative. They're not waiting for the make it curl, make it sweep. So they're doing their things a little bit differently, and it's kind of using their brains and so they're like, that's the benefit of having a team that's been together forever. And Nick Adine has that same benefit. His guys, they've been together as a team for how many championships and gold medals and silver medals and whatever they've won. So they're really tough to beat when they're playing their best. And listen, as good as Mark Nichols was playing, that battle at third today with Oscar Eriksson and Mark should be phenomenal. So I'm going to be watching closely from Sheet D. They're on Sheet A, I believe, tonight. So I got to kind of look out the corner of my eye. But it's been nice to watch. And Brad and Mark, just watching them up close and personal last.
Well, I think we're losing Mike. I think that's.
We lost you for a second. Listen, enjoy.
Okay. Anyway, they're very good curlers. Is all I'm saying. That's good.
Thank you, Mike. Good luck. Awesome.
Cheers. We'll see you soon. Okay. Thanks.
All right.
When Mike is talking about how both Jeff and EJ take control of the rock themselves, they're not listening, waiting for direction from the thrower or the skip. And you can see that now with the top teams. Rachel's team does an amazing job at that. And I think that's something traditional skips or the thrower have to get used to.
For sure.
The sweepers already are deciding the angle they've got to be at and what's got to happen.
So we're going to go to the University of Saskatchewan in a second call. But why we wanted to have the conversation about sweeping today is earlier in the Men's World Curling Championship, of course, something that was talked about a lot. We heard on the broadcast that in the eighth end, Canada versus Italy, Gushue made this allegation in the middle of the game that he thought maybe the Italians were dumping. Now, I've had to explain what dumping is. Some people know it, some people don't, but it's a sweeping motion. But in the case of dumping, you're sort of lifting your broom without finishing your stroke to slow the rock down. And people heard it on the broadcast. This is nothing new. In fact, we dug up some video going back to 2009, the trials there. Let's watch that, and then let's watch the Canada-Italy situation.
Of our archives.
Exactly.
Kevin Martin and his first. He does have the hammer, trailing by one.
Real hard line!
Come on, Mark. Line only. Hard. Hebert, Kennedy, again, what, 14 and a half or so?
14 and a half.
Oh, deep.
That would be deep.
Room.
They hammered it to get it by the top one.
Don't start with me.
And then it'll go back there.
Straight up in the air with a hair broom. What? Just watch. They're about to show it. Let's watch right now. Watch. Just watch. Just watch the video. Maybe it was an accident. Here it is. Watch this. Hair broom straight up. There. Right there. Kind of an important shot too, Ben.
We talk about what the brushing stroke must be, and you must finish away so there's no chance of debris going under it. I believe that was the conversation.
I love that video. Nice to dig it up, because in the push broom era, that sort of thing was almost a regular thing, whether you were in a club game or a provincial or a national championship, because the horsehair used to actually grab the frost a little bit more than what today's brooms do. So it would be common, we're heavy, lift straight up. I never did that, but instead of this away.
Did you? This is going to be a curling confessional today, Call.
Well, I couldn't do it, but you definitely saw it really from the time Paul Gausel and Ed Lukowicz sort of made push brooms popular. It wasn't on every shot by any stretch of the imagination.
So we saw that, and curling fans were talking about that in the wake of the Italy-Canada situation. Now let's watch what happened earlier this week in the eighth end, a pivotal moment between Gushue and Returnez.
Aspetta. Giù, secca. Spazio. Male sei, 7. Spazio. Tanto spazio. Solo giù.
This one a little bit more weight than Team Canada's stone. Just trying to come down and sit on the corner of it.
It's too heavy. Oh,
comes down. Did it come down enough that you can use maybe play quiet and push it back?
Bel tiro, Joy.
Oh, it looks like it might have got a touch underneath.
Guard. Just dumped right in front of it is what it looked like. But Think that's air?
All of this got us talking about whether or not dumping is a thing, whether or not that even was a dump. You did do some further exploring on that about kind of what can happen and what role do officials
Right.
curling when something like that happens. I have found a lot of officials stay totally clear of anything sweeping related.
Well, exactly. And to your point, Call, about doing some digging, I reached out to Team Gushue. Caleb Flaxey, who of course has been with the team for a while now, said he showed officials after the game that exact incident. He wrote me. He said to me that they acknowledged that they felt that it was an infraction and that they will, Caleb telling me, pay more attention to that. Caleb telling me that he felt frustrated because he said it was that exact thing that he brought up to officials ahead of the event. I reached out to Ryan Fry, who is coaching the Italian team. He said he also talked to officials. Don't know if they were the same ones, Call, but he says they felt it wasn't an infraction. All of that to say, isn't there a better way to do this? I mean, what about video review? Should it be? It's just an awkward thing in real time that rarely gets resolved.
Yeah, well, I think that we have, through the course of the season, seen some weird, interesting things with sweeping. One of them, there was an accusation that somebody actually burnt the rock, things like that. We had an incident at mixed doubles over a burnt rock. When you go to the officials, you're usually left with, oh, didn't see it, or can't do anything about it, it's already happened. So I think, to what we were just talking to Mike about, how much sweeping has improved in the last 2 years, and definitely 2 years before that, but the growth has just been this steady increase. They have to become more aware of making sure the rule, especially it's an obvious rule and happens 99% of the time, where they're actually making the right motion.
Right.
But heat of a moment, might it just be up? And sometimes there's a good reason for it, because there'll be 4 other rocks in the 4 foot and you can't actually do that. Right. So I think curling has always been this gentlemanly sport,
right?
Or whatever the right word is, and the officials just put the score up and measure rocks. And we had the hog line incident first day, where the technical, the innards, the lights were not working properly, and we had a ton in that first game. Cost people a lot of games across the board. No one, we would go to the officials and we don't think we were over, but nothing was happening because. So we need, I don't know, a rethinking.
Well, I'm just going to say this: if curling wants to be a professional sport, go to video review. Every other pro sport goes to video review. Hockey, you look at a goal. Football, you look at touchdown. Tennis, you've got technology. Why are we not stopping the game and going to video review? That's just my take on it.
I love it. I love that. I think it's needed. I think it's something that's sort of, because sweeping's becoming such a massive part and it always has been. It's even more so now, that when things go wrong, you need a better recourse and video review, rather than saying and if you're not a televised feed, you've got no way. Anyhow, but all of this, we got talking about sweeping, how much it's changing, and how sometimes people let us know they don't know what carving is or knifing is, and what directional sweeping and one person sweeping. We thought, who better to go to than University of Saskatchewan?
Well, and I always love going back to Saskatchewan.
Eugene,
we just had a question from Thomas just now saying, how much does dumping actually affect the stone? And so let's go to the University of Saskatchewan, Dr. Sean Ma, and of course, curling great Eugene Ritson. Here they are. We're on. Look, you guys are so riveted by the.
Good morning. Hello.
Hello. Nice to see you, Eugene.
Oh, good to see you.
The World Curling Sweeping Study. And you've been working on it for about a full season now at the Nutana Curling Club. Correct. What was the genesis of this?
Well, we were approached by the World Curling Federation at the time, and they wanted to try and make sure that the rules that they were developing around brushing were fair for everybody, and also so that World Curling could be sort of ahead of the game and anticipate issues that would arise, like dumping, for example. And would have good answers to those sorts of issues as they arose. And so they were trying to be proactive, but also ensure fair play for all curlers.
Okay, so I'm sure you guys just saw the videos, the incident in 2009, of course, and just Brad calling out the Italians now. Eugene, do we have any conclusive evidence to suggest that it makes a difference?
Well, you know, from my perspective, and we've done a lot of brushing tests, we don't ever, we wonder what is it that they're dumping if they're dumping. We don't have any evidence of anything coming off the brushes. Now, if you've got really frosty conditions, or in the days, as Colleen was mentioning, with straw brooms, there's a significant debris on the ice. But I ask people, what is it they're dumping? There's virtually nothing on the ice nowadays. And the second point, and Sean and I were just talking about it, because we in our studies are focusing very specifically on what affects how brushing affects the curling stone. And it's the middle 5 inches of the stone. It's a very narrow portion of the stone where the running surface is that brushing impacts. What we saw on that video replay there, I thought the Italian basically was hesitant. Sean and I were watching as the rock all of a sudden started to curl a little bit more, and he was started to come in, and his brush maybe did hit the ice. We didn't see it come within that 5-inch middle strip where the running path, the running band slides. So first of all, I don't think they impacted the running path of the stone. Secondly, would somebody ask me what they dumped? If somebody answer to me, tell me what they dumped, not ask.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a great point. It is not much, right? There's not a lot on the ice. Yeah. Wow.
And it may be an issue that used to be an issue like 20, 30 years ago. And with newer technology, it's not the issue it used to be, basically.
So, Eugene, what are some of the interesting things you're finding out? Like, because when you're watching today's sweepers and how they can chase rocks that are seemingly buried and directional sweeping, what are you guys finding when you're doing your testing of what is happening in that relationship with the brush and the pebble and the influence on the rock?
So we all understand that brushing cleans, it polishes, and it heats the ice. Cleaning is obvious. You can run down the ice with a push broom, turn it over, and there is some debris, and it's mostly fluff and threads and whatever. The polishing part, this is where it started to get difficult, because we have to find a way to photograph a pebble and be able to see how rocks and brushing impacts a pebble. And that was very challenging. I'll tell you, you're photographing a transparent piece of ice to be able to find minute details in the pebble, like the air bubbles and the striations from the curling stone. Man, we're talking about camera angles, lighting, lenses, tripods. It's been an interesting challenge, but we've conquered that one. And then the third thing, as far as the heating impacting the stone, we've got infrared video cameras, and we've got them on contraptions where we can follow brushes down the ice and record the heating patterns from their brushing. That's what we're working on.
Fascinating.
It is.
You also talked about you're doing a test where you're changing the direction of the fabric, same fabric, but using it, in a different direction. So what's the point of that?
We're going to be doing that in a couple of days' time, actually. Okay. So we have 2 versions of brush head, and the only difference is that the fabric's been rotated 90 degrees. So the warp and weft of the fabric has just rotated 90 degrees. And this is to basically evaluate whether it matters, whether what direction the fabric is oriented in, because you've been talking about knifing, for example. And knifing does 2 things. It reorients the head, so that's one difference, but it reorients the fabric, which is another. So we're going to take away the reorientation of the head and just look at the fabric and see if that matters. And this is an example of where the World Curling Federation can see whether this is something they need to worry about or not, and basically put curlers' minds at ease as to whether this is an important issue.
We just heard from Mike Harris about, these muscular men and leaning on the broom. We saw a broom snap. I think one of the Swiss sweepers snapped a broom. I've never seen that. So there's a lot of pressure. What do we know at this point about pressure versus stroke speed? Is there a sweet spot between all of that?
We don't know what the optimal pressure is yet, but we know that increasing pressure increases heat, increasing stroke rate increases heat, and we know that increasing heat on an ice surface decreases the stone ice friction, so the stone will slide easier. So now, what the interesting thing about the directional thing is that what we have found, and I have to defer to a couple of great scientists, Glenn Pauly and John Newhook, they analyzed a brushing stroke and they measured the pressure points on every stroke, and they found in the case that they used, the brusher started his stroke at about 150 pounds, and by the time he pushed through to 7 inches, it was down to 15 pounds. So what we have is a severe gradient in pressure. So guess what happens? Closest to your body, you're going to have more polishing, more heating, and away from your body less. Well, when you get a gradient like that, the heat gradient now across the path is going to have the effect. And we feel that that's a very significant factor. So we're trying to understand how much heat is the brush creating, and are we going to hit a point where you can create more heat and it isn't going to make a difference? We don't know that yet. Hopefully we'll find that out.
Whoever knew so much science involved in sweeping? This is a bit of, thermodynamics meets physics.
It is.
I don't know that we're that smart, we curlers.
Well, they're going to have to be pretty soon. And
that's one of the things, Colleen. Like, I used to work in speed skating, and it's true in every sport. The top coaches and athletes are always ahead of the science. You talk about the art and science of high performance sport. The high performers are always ahead of the science. They maybe can't explain it all in any, physics detail, but they can do something with it. And so the science is sort of trying to catch up a bit. And again, the interest here is to make sure that we have a level playing field for everybody, and that when new innovations come into the sport, that the sport can respond quickly and fairly and make good decisions, which is not something that happens in all sports. So I think curling's one of the more progressive sports in trying to be ahead of the game and respond appropriately when new technology and new techniques come through the pipeline.
I mean, what a job you guys have. I'm just imagining trying to configure these cameras and the time you've spent trying to take a photo of a pebble on the ice. I mean, it's fascinating. And people are pointing out your wife.
Well, and here's another thing I'd like to add, that we have we're approaching 140 articles in our literature review that we've read about the science of curling, of brushing, of heat, how ice behaves, and pulling all of that science together into these studies has been interesting and challenging. And as I've mentioned to Sean so often, testing my patience, but I understand that changes in science and finding curling truths doesn't come quickly or easily, but we're making baby steps. And I'm really pleased and impressed with the kind of data the data gathering mechanisms and the methodology and the data that we've already gathered. Now, to run it through the analysis, and Sean's job is going to be to write it up and get the peer review and get it out to public. That's time consuming, but it's all good. All I can say is we're finding a lot of good things out.
Unreal. It's so good. It's so good. Eugene, you're probably looking at all of this and going, whoa, if I would have known what I know now, wouldn't have missed a shot, right?
Well, Sean is right. Like we've talked about this, and Sean kind of thinks we were ahead of the science, or I was ahead of the science. And I honestly believe a lot of the things that we did when we won the World Seniors, and I've been to 12 Canadian senior and masters championships with a great sweeper. One guy, Dave Folk, 260 pounds, and he could really put weight on the broom. And I said, had I known now what I knew, had I known 50 years ago when I started curling, that I know now, I would have looked for 250 pound front enders that could bench press 450 pounds, because I'm seeing that's where you make the most significant difference in brushing.
Well, the funny thing about sweeping is that we were always same side sweepers back in the day, right?
Yes.
And so one turn you were great at, and then the turn where you were bad at. So we didn't know. We didn't know.
And instrumented brushes, we've got them now. You can buy them. And I work with a lot of teams in terms of testing their brushing, which tells them what their peak pressure is, their minimum pressure, their average pressure. And it's, we try left side, right side, open, close, straight behind. It's interesting. I was just working with the team here the other day, and the one person said, well, you know, I really like brushing from this side. And we found out with that person that they actually brush better from the other side. So forget it. We don't care how you feel. You're more effective on this side.
Right.
You stay on this side. And those are the kinds of things that I think are important.
Well,
I love it. I absolutely love it. The work you're doing, invaluable. It's no doubt going to change the game. So we're going to be checking in with you. This has been a fascinating conversation and a whiteboard that Colleen Jones would be envious of. Look at that.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
I have John Newhook and his magic broom. And, you know, when they talked about your push is strong, but your pull is, that's where my weakness is, pulling back. I lose a lot of poundage on that. But it's all this knifing, carving, and directional sweeping. I mean, it's changed the game so much and made it so much more athletic. It's fabulous.
I got to say, that's one of my favorite conversations on the show. The way they explained it, the work they're doing, the way they spell it out, I think it's fantastic. So, listen, a perfect segue. We couldn't have planned it any better, actually. John Cullen, of course, a lot of curling fans and people who follow the sport in this country know that name. He calls the games. He's a part of the game. And now he has some exciting news, and we're going to bring him on the show. His That Curling Show debut here today. And John, wonderful to see you. I hope you're as riveted by all of these conversations as we are. But over to you to reveal the big news, because it's rather apropos today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is like a first time, long time situation. So I'm thrilled to be on the show with you two. I like you said, speaking of brooms, for the last 2 years, I've been working on a podcast project that's going to be coming out on CBC Podcasts on May 6th. It's going to be called Broomgate, a curling scandal. And it's going to be a 6-episode podcast series where basically I visited with pretty much everybody involved in the Broomgate scandal back in 2015, talked to them about, just what it was. It felt like the perfect time. It felt like we're 8 years in the future. Maybe some of the wounds have healed a little bit, but we still remember what happened. And so, talk to a ton of the players, broom manufacturers, rule makers of the game, just to kind of, because I feel like the whole like true story has never been told. So that was kind of the goal with the podcast. And it's coming out in a month, and I couldn't be more excited about it.
Oh, that's great. What was the most interesting thing, without giving away the whole podcast, and we can't wait to listen to it?
Sure. Yeah. I would say the most interesting thing for me, I think, you guys have been talking a lot about Brad Gushue and how he thinks the game. And I've been telling a lot of curlers about this particular anecdote that I thought was really interesting. So in the 2014-15 season, Mike McEwen and Reed Carruthers are using the hardline ice pad, and they're having an amazing season. And as particularly Mike, he's having like one of the best tour seasons of all time. And no one can kind of like, he's obviously good, but he is having like an incredible, he played in 12 events. He made the finals in 11 of them. Wow. He won 8 of them. Like, it was crazy. And towards the end of the season, Brad Gushue kind of figures out that maybe it's something to do with the broom. And so they ask Hardline, hey, can you send us some brooms? We'd be really interested to try out these brooms, see what's going on here. And they kind of immediately figure out that the ice pad is very good and too good, right? And so what Brad does is he tells Goldline, at the time he's sponsored by Goldline, he tells Goldline, sorry, we're leaving you. We're going to use Hardline brooms. But he tells Hardline, I don't want any money from you. I don't want to be sponsored by you, because he knew that going into that 2015-16 season, the crap was going to hit the fan, and he wanted to be able to not be held to a broom manufacturer, to be able to use whatever broom was going to be the legal broom or the top broom, whereas all these other curlers were tied into these manufacturer contracts. So that was just like, I was like, holy smokes, like 10 years ago, this guy's thinking the game on a level that no one else is thinking it at.
Right. And he also did that video where he was able to show like that. Here he is now in the, well, it's not a a big issue. But that dumping story out of Italy, and he'd love to see more input from officials calling things like that. So he often leads the way on these issues, and Broomgate was maybe the start of using his voice and knowledge.
Yeah, for sure. We've heard that from a lot of curlers that, obviously Broomgate was a difficult time for the sport, but it was also a time where, maybe it did force the professionalization of the game. Looking back in the rule book in 2014-15, the section on sweeping was half a page.
Wow.
So that the rules were basically you can't damage the ice with a broom, and you have to finish your stroke away from the rock. And other than that, pretty much nothing. If you wanted to staple a tarp to the end of a stick and use that as a broom, at the Olympics, there was nothing in the rules that said you couldn't. So
wow. Before we go any further, we have a promo, so let's get that in. Let's take a listen to it right now.
Every sport has their big, juicy controversy. Boxing has the Mike Tyson ear bite. Cycling has Lance Armstrong. Baseball has its steroid era. Curling has Broomgate. It's a story of broken relationships, houses divided, corporate rivalry, and a performance-enhancing broom.
It was a year I'd like to forget.
Broomgate, wherever you get your podcasts.
Wow. Whose voice was that? It's a year I'd like to forget, by the way.
That's Jerry Gertz, former director of the World Curling Tour. And we asked all the curlers if, how would you describe Broomgate? And Jerry just kind of paused and then said, a year I'd like to forget, which was pretty good.
Our people how deep were the scars, John? Like it was scarring, wasn't it?
Yeah, totally. I think, you guys were talking about this earlier in the show. I think one thing that curling has always wanted is an officials free sport, right? That's always, the rule book has always kind of been directed at, well, ultimately the curlers can figure it out. And then it seemed like with Broomgate, we sort of learned where the line was in terms of like, well, maybe we shouldn't let the curlers all have to figure it out, right? And so, in a lot of cases, it was up to the curlers to just sort of decide, agree on what broom they were going to use, what broom they weren't going to use. And that led to some really, really tough conversations, some friendships that were ended that are still not mended. I mean, when in talking to curlers, like before the project, like trying to convince them to do it, we had some curlers that straight up said no, they were just like, I don't want to talk. I still can't talk about it. And then we had other curlers that were very trepidatious about still, because they said, I still kind of feel like I'm walking on eggshells around this person. I don't want to make it any worse or whatever. So it's, but definitely at that time, we're running very deep, no question about it.
Yeah. Well, the promos got me hooked. So maybe podcasts?
Yes, it'll be out on CBC Podcast. It's coming out May 6th, Monday, May 6th. The full 3-minute trailer that will maybe get you even more hooked, Colleen, is coming out in a couple weeks. So pay attention to that. You can follow me on Twitter at Cullen on Curling, and I'll obviously be talking about it a lot there. But I know you guys only have a few shows left in your season, so we had to squeeze in here and get a promo in before you guys take off for the summer. So it's that's all the details. Can't wait for it to be out, and can't wait for the curling world to hear it.
Informative, and I know the work you did sounds like you had to do a deep dive and a lot of digging. So good for you. Good talk.
Thank you.
No
Thanks
kidding.
so much.
We love a John Cullen CBC podcast collab. So May 6th, marked on the calendar. Can't wait. John, thanks for making time for us.
Awesome. Thanks, Devin and Colleen. Take care.
Okay. Great stuff. Listen, I love this sport. You love this sport. A lot of people try to make it better, but there's also some incredible stories and periods of history, times in this game. You think of the boycott in the early 2000s, you think of Broomgate. Like, there are some really juicy times in Canadian curling history.
No kidding. And, sometimes we don't appreciate those stories are so riveting. Like, take the Netflix documentary that they did on the Al Hackner, Pat Ryan, Breyer final. You wouldn't have thought, oh, that's not going to be very interesting. It was so well done. It was good. How many other stories are there like that? A lot. Every champion usually has an incredible story behind them, and or every championship final. So I'm glad that John did the work and took the time to pitch and make the podcast, Broomgate.
We are winding down. 15 minutes to game time. Canada, Sweden, the first place showdown at the Men's World Curling Championship. And now we go to Newfoundland and Labrador, where we find cheerleader number 1, Colette Nichols, who has stuck around for us. Colette, wonderful to see you.
Wonderful to see you guys.
How is it watching, especially the way Mark is playing? You must be so proud.
Well, it's never easy, to be honest. Even after doing it for 20 plus years, you're still always on the edge of your seat. Thankfully, though, this week I'm very distracted. Both of the boys are in hockey tournaments, soccer tournaments. I'm at the hockey rink right now, actually. Beckett's playing provincials. Emmett's in another rink shooting pucks. So we're just busy.
You're busy. Colette, Colleen and I were talking earlier this week about the journey you and Mark have been on, the journey Brad and Mark have been on. Could you have ever imagined that this is what they'd still be doing all these years later, and they like literally at the top of their game?
100% no. To be quite honest with you, we thought after the Beijing Olympics that we were gonna, pack it in. It's facts. We talked to the kids when they got home, and they didn't want to see their dad pack it in yet. And he's still healthy. He's still playing really well. I truly believe that he still has a few more years to go. And I also think, not to be biased or anything, but I don't think there's a Brad Gushue without a Mark Nichols. I think the two of them make each other great in a number of different ways. We went to Manitoba for 2 years, and, I think the writing on the wall was there, and that's part of the reason why we came back.
Yeah, they're a dynamic duo. They're Batman and Robin, and I would totally agree with you. They are absolutely codependent on each other in the best of ways.
Yeah, they really are. That friendship's been there since before juniors, right? And I think that something also has to be said in consistency within your team too, right? Like, just because it's not working in that first 4-year period doesn't mean that you should just
right.
And we definitely parted ways with a player or two over a cycle, but you have to really still think too, right? Like the long road.
Yeah.
Amen to sticking it out in relationships and life. And you're right. I mean, we live in a world now where it's not working, pull the Band-Aid off, get to the next. But that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Team like Nick and Dean too. I mean, those guys have been just so solid.
Forever. They've been together forever.
Yeah. And there's mental telepathy, and there's an understanding, and there's forgiveness that goes on. And really, at the end of the day, you're pretty much best friends.
Yeah.
So,
Colette, just to the point of Emmett and Beckett wanting Dad to keep going, how wonderful has it been for you guys? And look at this. I mean, you have a lot of these photos now. This is so special. But how wonderful has it been to see the boys grow up and understand the pursuit of their dad, and now be at a place in their own athletic pursuits that they know how great it is what Dad is doing?
I tend to want to brag about my kids, and not based on their talent on the ice or on a soccer field. My kids are definitely not the shining stars of hockey, but my kids are the best teammates that some of these kids will ever get. The amount of respect that my kids will give to kids, they are very dedicated to their practice. They're very dedicated to understanding what rest and recovery is. Like Beckett knows that, if it's in between games, we're going home, we're going to eat something good, we're going to take a break. You have to deconnect. He's seen his dad do this for a number of years. And he appreciates every second that he's out there. And so does Emmett, because, you know, it's not a given that you're going to make an all-star team. Did Beckett make it as an all-star this year, as a first year, as a 9-year-old? He did, but I truly believe he worked hard for it. You know, he doesn't score the most amount of goals, but he gives so much more to this team than, you know, goal scoring. He's very respectful. He'll do what he's asked when he's asked. And all of those attributes that Beckett and Emmett have 1,000% come from Mark. Like, Mark is grit. Like, he will practice every day. It's, yes, Brad, you know, what can we do here, guys, to make this going? Like, he's never in the middle of a controversy. He's not going to argue. I feel like he's always the glue to any 4-man team we have. Right? Like, he's the one that people go to if they're having troubles. He's also the person they go to if someone's mad or upset. Like, Beckett and Emmett have their dad. Like, they're Mark Nichols Juniors, like, through and through.
Double amen. That's so inspiring to hear.
They're good kids. They're good kids, but they're following in the footsteps of truly an amazing human that gives everything. Like, you know, you can probably count on one hand how many hockey games Mark's been to this year for Beckett. Like, one hand. Sometimes we're in the dressing room and Beckett will say, "Mom, you're the only mommy in here." And it's facts. I am. But we do what we got to do because we all love what we're doing and we're making sacrifices. And, you know, Mark wanted us to be in Switzerland this year, but if we would have went, Beckett wouldn't be able to play All-Star next year. They would take away that right from him. So he started the year with his team. He ultimately made the decision to stay on his team, and he wants to try out for All-Star again next year. So a 9-year-old made a huge sacrifice this week, and we stuck with it.
Good, because he's got his life. It's about his life, right?
And he wants to play, so who am I to say no? Let's go.
Hey, who are you picking in today's games?
Oh, God, Colleen, no.
Okay.
I'm always going to pick Canada, but I think it's going to be tight. Like, it's going to be tight. We can't get down early. We can't.
Okay.
Oh, look at this. Stephanie is always giving me updates on the hammer. I was literally about to check. Sweden is going to start with hammer. So that's, you know, we don't always love that, but
yeah, well, I'm not going to say our hammer percentage has been very great this year, so I'll just throw that out there.
Good. Then you've won a ton of games. So
I don't think it's been too great, but like, I'm not a statistician.
Math eludes us in science and math, although it's been a science-heavy show. Colette, it's almost game time. You've got the boys. You've got to wrangle them up. You've got a game to watch. You're super mom, no doubt. And just really beautiful words. Always so thoughtful and great to see you.
Yeah, I know. I miss you.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed meeting some of your relatives when
I know. Way to ride the bus with that Saskatchewan crew, Colleen. They'll never lead you away.
They are actually they wound up getting Ubers. They got
well, you can't be late for a game.
Yeah. Well, they were dressed for gorgeous and not the -40. Same for Devon when we were there. Like, we'd be walking too cold. I'm going, you are a Saskatchewan boy. This is not too cold, but it's how we dress.
It's a different kind of cold. It's a different kind of cold.
We'll do another show on dressing. It is a beautiful cold. I enjoyed our time there.
Okay, listen, game time, roll call. Colette, thanks so much. Enjoy the game. Enjoy the ride. It's so fun to watch the boys grow up and watch the family evolve. So thanks for making time.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
We are growing up with those boys, aren't we?
I mean, and also, I think that's the connection and what is the powerful thing in curling and the connection to fan and the team is that people get to watch curlers grow up, literally. You're mic'd up. You see them year after year. You feel like you know them. You develop relationships with them.
And you really do know them. Because those microphones, how else would we have known that Brad thought it was dumping, right? They tell a story of everything, of when they're frustrated, of when they're happy, of when they're relieved. their eye movements show it. You know, you really do know them.
No kidding. Okay, that's a wrap. We got to get ready for the game.
We do. It'll be.
I mean, last rock. What do you think? Last rock?
Yeah. You know what? I haven't seen a Dean play enough this year. We all know he's great, and we are watching some of the games. He's making incredible shots. I think the showdown at third between Mark and Oscar is going to be so pivotal. And the way Mark is playing, it's hard to see Mark playing an under 90% game. Now, we know Oscar can do that too. I just think it's going to be a beautiful game today. And whoever is hammering the 10th is going to win.
Can't wait. I got Canada, and I'm going to say that I think this is going to be a gold medal rematch.
I love that. Okay. It'll be a gold medal rematch.
You heard it here on That Curling Show.
All right. Good to be with everybody today. Yeah. And enjoy the game.
We missed you, Call. Thanks. Awesome.
Okay. Thanks, producer Soph.
Thanks, Soph.
Curling now enters the Sports Weekend spotlight.